Hey guys, Happy New Year! I hope you all had a great Christmas and great 2019. I've got a really busy year planned already with podcast collaborations, certain guests. I'm also got a trip to Mexico planned, Amsterdam. I've got a few things to London. My girlfriend got me tickets to see Book of Mormon next week, so look out on Instagram for a review of that, which I'm really excited for. But anyway, let's get this intro started. My guest this week is Thom King. Now, Thom King is the CEO of a company called Steviva. I hope I'm pronouncing that right. And he was essentially one of the first people to bring back Stevia, the artificial sweetener, to the USA. Now, Stevia is used in a lot of protein bars and a lot of essentially great food that you can get, which is basically sweet and it tastes great, but it doesn't have a lot of the negative things that sugar has. And we kind of go into that a bit in this podcast. As well as that, he's got a book out, which is called Guy Gone Keto. I've got a link to the website in the description. That's about his book and his journey through his ketogenic lifestyle. It's not a diet book. It's more of like a journey book, but going through a state of ketosis, doing the ketogenic diet was kind of what set him off on this journey. So that's really interesting, and we get into that. We also talk about biohacking and microbiomes and metabolism, sort of that side of nutrition. And we also talk about sort of almost his success story in a way, like what he does to keep himself on top of things. He meditates, he does mindfulness exercises, he writes a journal every day, he has got loads of sticky notes everywhere, he plans his life goals, he does a lot of these things. So it's very inspirational to hear them, and can be very beneficial to anyone who wants to start up a company or a business or do any of these sort of things. It's just very motivational, as well as linking with nutrition and exercise. It all sort of culminates into a great conversation. As well as that, we also get into sort of what food waste there is, respecting animals, sort of alternative eating, the politics of food. So those sort of things are also spoken about. Now, this is technically part one of a two-part chat. Part two will be out next week, but I'll be releasing it as its own standalone episode because we start talking about spirituality, memento mori, life after death, sort of these sort of things. So you can look out for that next week. But yeah, the conversation does keep on going. Now, you notice when this conversation starts, it kind of starts midway through, and I do apologise for that. There was a slight technical issue, which basically means the first 2 or so minutes of the audio didn't come out properly. That's my fault. I apologise for that. But as a quick summary, essentially, the rest of the conversation goes on swimmingly well. You can understand it all perfectly fine. But this is just a quick summary of what Thom basically said. The book essentially comes from about 3 years ago. He had a realization when he was like a Vegas trade show. He was eating lots of sugar, felt like crap and things, so he decided to go on the ketogenic diet. So that was one part. Another part was essentially he is a 5th generation entrepreneur. So his dad, grandfather, great-grandfather, etc. were entrepreneurs as well, doing a lot of crazy things, including supplying tents to the US Army. So that's really cool. And also that he was one of the first people to import stevia. He also says the term diabesity, which is brilliant. Diabetes and obesity put together. Fantastic term. And essentially, from there, the conversation starts going. So I'm going to stop yammering on and get on with the show. Just before that, though, is a quick promo from the Brave Files podcast, and then it'll get straight onto the show. So thanks as always for tuning in, guys, and I'll be back at the end to talk about part 2 of this chat and more.
This is Heather Vickery. I'm the host of the Brave Files podcast. The Brave Files is an interview show that shares stories of real people who choose to live courageously every day. Each week, we introduce you to a new person that has decided to make brave choices despite all of their fears. From being a social justice warrior, to murder in self-defense, to starting a business that allows you to travel the world and everything in between. There are a million ways to choose bravely each and every day. We also feature a charity of the week and learn actionable ways to help make the world better together. The Brave Files provides insight, encouragement, and connection on a deeply human level. So if you're looking for a podcast that's compelling, engaging, and inspiring, check out the Brave Files. You'll find us anywhere you enjoy podcasts.
Welcome to Genuine Chit-Chat, where we have honest conversations with interesting people. And I'm your host, Mike Burton.
a ketogenic lifestyle, like just, cutting out sugars, cutting out alcohol, cutting out carbs, and just getting very focused on, losing weight, getting my blood pressure lower. And so I, in that process, did a bunch of data collection, like writing it down and like goal setting and journaling. And before I knew it, it actually had just turned into a book. So,
Okay, wow.
so yeah, and then the book came out in May of this year. And at that point, I started, we have a food technology lab here, and I just started making products. I started making condiments, things that I was going to need, for this ketogenic journey. And that spawned, basically a consumer brand. So the whole Guy Gone Keto concept just completely grew organically out of me being sick and tired and miserable with the person that I was.
I see, I see. Well, it's like I have a protein bar. Like I eat a fair few, but I noticed like, over the last couple of years I've been getting a lot more healthy and got more interest in other diets and things as well. And one chocolate bar protein bar that I've been consuming is it's called Quest. It's Quest Nutrition, and they use stevia. And I think I first heard about them on like the Joe Rogan podcast or something along those lines. And I'd never even really considered that sort of thing. And the protein bars, so many of them have got such high sugar in and things like that. It's madness. I was buying quite a few like a couple of years ago, and I was just looking at the calories and all the content. And I was like, yeah, this is really high in protein, but it's like a Mars bar or anything like that. So
Right.
yeah, so it's seeing knowing that you're sort of one of the key individuals has helped almost bring on the positive sweetener revolution. I should have thought before that made it sound so grandiose, and then that name was terrible. But
I
it's
liked it.
good.
Just
Thank you
keep
very
going
much.
with it. I like the
Yeah,
revolution.
flow with it.
So
Why not? I love anything revolution, just technological revolution and like
yes.
the industrial revolution. And now I think we're probably in a social revolution, but probably about the 20th one because one every few years, but nothing wrong with that. So for people who are not as, say, diet savvy, with the ketogenic diet, I know sort of bits and pieces about it. But would you like to just explain it sort of to individuals who don't know what it sort of is? And
Well, it's actually pretty simple. Your diet is going to consist of 70% fat, 20% protein, and 10% carbs. And those carbs are going to come from like cruciferous vegetables like broccoli, cauliflower, kale, lettuce, spinach. And that's basically it. And that, so what your body has the ability to function on glucose as an energy source, but your body also has the ability to switch that and to start operating off of fat. And so what happens is when you're consuming that fat, your liver turns that fat or metabolizes that fat into ketones, and then you can use those ketones actually as an energy source. So if you move from a high carb diet and eliminate the carbs and you adopt a ketogenic lifestyle, probably your first week's going to be tough until you become what's called fat adapted, where your body is actually able to burn those fats. So the first week you might, feel what they call the keto flu.
mm,
I never had it, but I do know people that have had it, experienced it. And once you move past that, it's like somebody turned the lights on.
yeah,
You're just,
I've heard that.
it's your brain function. I think the losing weight is definitely positive. Like, who doesn't want that? But I would say that the real solid benefit is going to be energy level and brain function, where you can't even compare the two. Like, on a high carb diet, it's slow, sluggish afternoon coffee sometimes, or tea in your case.
Yeah.
Um, and with keto, you don't get that lag in the afternoon.
Mm.
You're burning super clean energy. Um, yeah, and takes you through the day.
So how long have you been on the ketogenic diet, if you don't mind me asking?
I don't mind at all. About 3.5 years.
Okay.
I literally started it at that trade show
Okay.
in Vegas, and I had dabbled with it before. Like I used it as a diet, and the problem is like if you use a diet, diets are temporary. meaning, oh, I'm going to go on a diet and lose a few pounds. Well, what happens is you lose a few pounds, you go off the diet, then you gain that weight back. And every time you gain a little bit more, and your body becomes a little more insulin resistant, meaning that it's going to be harder each time you try to lose that weight. So that's called yo-yo weight, and where you're up and you're down. And really, for me, it's like diets don't work. You need to make a lifestyle shift.
Yeah, I totally agree with you there. That's what I've noticed there's been almost revolution once again, word of the day. I've noticed that especially in England, where we kind of our culture does follow a lot of America's in a lot of way and things. And what I've noticed is kind of we've got this influx of sort of fast food, and you've got we've got something called Deliveroo over here, and we've also got Uber Eats, which I think you guys will probably have Uber Eats, where it's just like McDonald's don't deliver, but you can pay someone to go and get you McDonald's and they bring it to you. So it's basically the same thing. And it's like that's obviously very convenient and great for a few times and stuff, but it's like with Netflix, which I obviously love Netflix, and I love all these sort of great things, but it makes it a lot easier to stay inside. But equally on the flip side, you've got things like a lot more gyms are popping up, a lot more sort of 24-hour gyms. You pay just like over here, it's like £20 a month, which isn't that much at all. And that's just unlimited gym use for like, every day, 24 hours, however much you want. And there's something that opened up near me recently, which I have yet to try, called Fit Chefs. Now, Fit Chefs it's basically takeaway, but it's good for you, it's healthy. So I want to get your sort of opinion on how you think it's progressing. Do you think it's generally getting better, or do you think it's getting worse, or do you think that kind of each end is getting sort of further away from each other?
I think things are getting better, because when you look at, even in the UK, the sugar tax on sugary beverages like soft drinks, I mean, that makes a huge impact. And I think across the United States, same thing. Like, you're getting cities like Manhattan and Berkeley and Boulder, Colorado, that are putting a tax on sugary beverages. And I think that's really a step in the right direction, because it consumers will start making better choices, and it really creates top of mind awareness of how detrimental eating too much sugar can be. So I think things are getting better. And also, when you look at the trends of consumer products, particularly food in the US, when you look at the highest growth companies like Quest, you're seeing explosive growth on companies that cater to people's ketogenic lifestyle. And most definitely Quest is one of those, a leader, in fact.
Yeah, and it's one of those things that I've noticed as well, because obviously there's Whole Foods and things like that popping up as well. And obviously I have mixed feelings about sort of veganism, which I'd like to get your views on it as well, which is I appreciate the morality of veganism. I think being vegetarian is greatly moral, but I think most of the damage, at least to the animal's well-being, is more from the milk and the eggs, because, if you have a young animal, it grows of age, it gets slaughtered. It's not a pleasant life, but it's over then, rather than being kept alive for as long as possible in a tiny little horrible caged, in a cage or a tiny room or anything like that. So veganism does kind of trump vegetarianism on that end, but the diet for veganism is, a lot of them will argue it's very natural, and I'm not a nutritionalist, so I'm not going to necessarily say it's not, but from the experience of what I've seen and from what I've heard and things like that, and obviously general human evolution, I would say it's more sort of the ketogenic or the paleo diet, or I'm trying to think, there's the primal diet, which is like the carnivore diet. Is it? I don't know much about the paleo diet.
Well, paleo, I mean, paleo is, I mean, that's going to be eating basically what, our ancestors ate 40,000 years ago. So, like naturally occurring grains and nuts and, and meat. So that's, I mean, paleo is a perfectly fine diet, for some people. And I'm also, one thing that I do want to stress is that while leading a ketogenic lifestyle for me has been great, and I know a lot of other people that have adopted it, and it's worked out quite well for them. It's not for everybody. So paleo might be, better for you, or vegetarian or vegan. But I think probably so I do some biohacking, like different experiments on myself, like tweaking my microbiome, or taking a regime of cannabinoids to see the efficacy, as pain management or sleep medicine. So
Is
I
that,
do
just to
these
clarify, is that
series.
like CBD oil and that sort of thing, like
It
cannabinoids?
is.
Yes, I was going
It
to
is.
ask about that. Funny enough, but yeah, continue. Sorry.
So yeah, and we can get into that because I am doing in January. I'm going to be doing like 21 days of probably somewhere between 500 milligrams and 1,000 milligrams of CBD,
Okay.
and I'll be testing my blood before and looking at inflammation markers, and probably renal function, as well as like as liver function as well, like creatinine levels, because I want to see how it's metabolized. I also want to see, if it is able to lower inflammation in any way, because there's been a ton of claims made about CBD, being effective for pain management or stress, or even sleep, for that matter. But I, and I've done some formulating, for customers in that category, but I've yet to see, proof or evidence that it is indeed effective. And so it's going to be anecdotal, of course, me just dosing myself with it, but I mean, starting somewhere. And
Yeah, and
that
that's a
way
good way
I'll
to do
know.
it.
Yeah, and I'll know for sure. Like I talk, my doctors, they're not 100% on board with some of the stuff that I do, but with this, we discussed, the sort of the anecdotal uh, data that's going to be collected, and they seem to think that it's fine. It's like a good place to start, but at least I'll know. At least I'll know. Well, in my case, this is what CBD did. Um, so I do those like every other month, depending on my health, because sometimes, like, if I'm infecting myself with a particular uh, like lactobacillia type bacteria to see if I can alter my microbiome, sometimes I get a little sick.
Mm.
So
I
it's
can
like,
imagine, yeah. Because for people who don't know, like microbiome, you speaking about essentially your gut biome. Is that what you're speaking of? So all the bacteria in your stomach. That
right.
is it. The enteric nervous system. Is that what it affects? I know very few buzzwords and very little
No, that's
substance. So
pretty good. It's actually, the bacteria don't really reside in your stomach as much as they do your upper and lower intestine. So that's where a lot of your digestion takes place. But your microbiome is responsible for more than 75% of your immune system. And 90% of your serotonin is actually generated from your gut. And also, the vagus nerve is your largest nerve in your body that runs behind your heart, regulates heartbeat. That actually, it goes right from your gut right to your brain. So there's this amazing sort of mind-gut connection that I've been experimenting with, uh, for no other reason, just for my own knowledge. So
that's the best
I've
way to do it.
introduced,
You don't have to hold
yeah,
back for anyone else. You're like, I want to do this. The same with what you're saying you're going to do in January and all the sort
yeah,
of the other things you've been doing is like, I want to do this,
yeah,
and it doesn't really matter. I've got the resources that I can do this. I'm going to do this for me and just share with everyone else. You can't have
yeah,
a unanimous thing that's going to work perfectly for everyone. As
right,
one little example I often give to people is just like allergies. It's that simple.
right,
Like I can't eat blueberries, which is very upsetting to me. My girlfriend's recently found out she's quite lactose intolerant, but it's come on, as the years go on, you can just become
yeah,
allergic to things. Some people
sure,
never are, some people are. So it's like
huh,
you can't have a diet or a style or anything that works unanimously for every single person, especially when
right.
something as simple as allergies exist.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely, and really, I believe that a lot of those allergies and a lot of, and particularly lactose intolerance, I think is a function of the microbiome.
Mm.
So, I mean, there's a lot going on inside of the body. Like, a lot of it has to do with that village. You've got this village of a trillion different bacteria, and sometimes you get some gangsters in there.
That's a
So.
good way of putting it. Um,
Yeah, so I've had gangsters in that village before, and I've done some biohacking to try to get them out. And by and large, it's been pretty successful. But um, really, this is sort of a circuitous way to get to veganism and how vegan and vegetarian fits into a ketogenic lifestyle. So I think in February or March, depending on how I'm feeling, I'll probably go 90 days of vegan keto. Um,
Okay. I've
I
not heard
think
of
it's
vegan keto. That's quite interesting. How would that how would that sort of work? Obviously, because a lot of the healthy fats from a standard ketogenic diet, from my understanding, comes from a lot of meat.
no, actually, you're going to get more protein from meat, and if you
That's what I
eat
was
too
saying.
much protein, if you eat too much protein, it'll actually throw you out of ketosis, because protein's converted to glycogen and stored in your muscles, and basically you've got, your body's full of glucose at that point. So consuming too much protein can definitely, take you out of keto and put you into a metabolic state. So I don't think that vegan keto or vegetarian keto is going to be that difficult, because you can eat. There is a lot of plant-based foods that are very fatty, like nut butters, any kind of nuts, and uh, like coconut
Mm.
oil and
Yes,
avocado.
yes.
So the only thing that I wouldn't be having is any grains. Um, so I think it's totally doable. And in
Mm.
fact, it could even be, I don't know, maybe even a little easier than doing like a omnivore version of keto. But I'll find out. I'll find out, and I post everything, so I'm I'm kind of transparent about stuff like that. Like I'll post my results from my microbiome test. I'll post blood tests. Because I've been able to move a lot of markers, which has been kind of fascinating.
Yeah, because I've only had my blood work done sort of once. I did it a year or so ago. I need to do it more frequently, but it costs a fair amount over here, and I do not yet have the money to be frivolously spent. Or frivolously, it is my health, but I did it, and it was just like everything is generally okay, but your vitamin D is a little bit low, and I just take vitamin D supplements. I mean, it could just go outside more, but you know,
Right.
but apart from that, so I was quite happy about that. But it's like I would love to just every month be able to kind of experiment around with it, because I've recently been getting more and more interested in food, and it's one of the reasons I was quite excited to speak to you as well. Of especially looking on your site and seeing, like, I didn't even think about these things. Like I saw you've got the sort of ketogenic, you've got the barbecue sauce, teriyaki sauce, ketchup, that sort of
Yeah.
things, and it was like I've heard keto. In all honesty, most of the things I've heard from ketogenics comes from Joe Rogan, because he talks about it quite regularly.
Mhm.
But and I've looked into it a bit here and there, and a couple of my friends have tried it. But I hadn't even thought of condiments, because like I've got some barbecue sauce that I love, but I try just to avoid looking at how much sugar's in it, because it's like sweet barbecue honey sauce. It's just oh god,
Yeah.
it tastes so good, but it's terrible. So yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, it's amazing. I see that you've got all those products and you're sort of expanding, and is that kind of a thing, like same as with your, I assume, your book and what you've been doing with your sort of biohacking, is you're just like, this thing doesn't exist. I would like to have that thing, so I'm gonna get it made, and then I'm gonna share it with everyone else. Is that kind of how you went about
Mike, you've nailed it. I mean,
it?
so these things are sort of selfishly created, because I can't have them. So like I couldn't really have ketchup, because like if you think about how much sugar is in ketchup and barbecue sauce, there's more sugar in those two condiments than there is ice cream. So
That's
it's
so
like
upsetting to me. That's so
it's like having
upsetting.
a hamburger with a scoop of ice cream on top of it.
It does sound pretty
So
weirdly good.
I know, right? So yeah, so I wanted to have condiments for myself. Like I love sweet chili sauce,
Yes.
and I love teriyaki sauce, and I mean, all the sauces I love, but I couldn't have them. And I was like, you know what, screw it, I will make these. And yeah, then it sort of organically took off. Then when people had them, they're like, oh my God, this is really good. We got to, you should sell this. And well, that's what
Well, that's where
happened.
you are. That's where you are today.
Uh,
Out of interest, I do want to keep talking about all these sort of things, and I've got a list of huge things. You're a very interesting guy. But if we rewind almost to sort of back to when you were a young adult, how did you get on this trajectory? I mean, I know you had sort of the moment of clarity in Vegas, but I know that you say you're a fifth generation entrepreneur. Now, does that mean that you're an entrepreneur and you're on your fifth project, or does that mean that you're four generations before you? Like, sort of, where did you start to get to where you are now, in a sense?
Good questions. Fifth generation entrepreneur. Um, that means that, yes, great-great-grandfather. So my great-great-grandfather had an awning company, and he sold tents to, or supplied tents to the military during World War I. And then my great-grandfather uh, and my grandfather had awning companies as well, that they sold tents to the U.S. Army in World War II, and then supplied all the covers for for NFL football, American football.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah.
and then my father had a contracting company and was a rancher. So it's been a long line of entrepreneurs, and I dabbled in, being an entrepreneur when I was younger, and failed quite a few times.
Well, that's
So
what
I
being an
think
entrepreneur is about. Is you can't learn what succeeds and what gets right until you start, messing up. It's about falling down, getting back up, and keep on going rather than just falling and giving up.
yes, true. And I just kept getting back up, and then I moved to Arizona, and when I was in Arizona, I ran into a gentleman, Jim May, who had just come back from Paraguay and had a big box of all these different types of herbs that he'd gotten on his trip. And one of them in particular, he said, "Hey, you should try this." And it was a green paste, and I basically took a little bit of it, and it was about 25 times sweeter than sugar. And at that point in time, a light bulb went off, and I was thinking, there's got to be a way to extract these sweet constituents out of this leaf. And it was about the same time that aspartame got approved by the FDA, and it's like, maybe this would make a great, replacement, or natural replacement for aspartame. And so I spent all my money and 5 years of hard work of trying to find a company that could use a water extraction process to get those sweet constituents out, and got it done. And in 2008, the FDA uh, cleared the way for stevia to be used as a sweetener in food products. So that was 10 years ago, and that's when business really started to boom.
That's
So
amazing.
yeah,
Yeah,
I was super grateful, and I don't know, it's a lot of hard work and a lot of failure. So
I can imagine though, looking back on it, it's one of those things where you have that sort of thing, almost ironically, your gut feeling, where it's like you've got this pull of something. You kind of like you see something, and something just kind of a switch flicks in your mind, and you're like, there's something here. I don't know what yet, but there's definitely something here. And then you followed that, and you were like, something's here. I know it is, and you kept pushing it and pushing it and pushing it, and then you got it. You've managed to, you get there, and now you are where you are, and you're just building the Stevia empire almost.
yeah, that's what I call a holy shit moment. So it's like when you find something, like when I tasted the stevia leaves, that was my holy shit moment. I was like, oh man, this is something that the world needs to see. And subsequently, over the past decade, there's other compounds that I've run into, like monk fruit, which is also a natural high intensity sweetener. And then another one that I've been working with called allulose. That's been the one that I've been working with most recently, that functions exactly like sugar. So the sweetener industry and the options for consumers has expanded greatly. And yeah, and it's a fun industry to be in.
Am I right in thinking you're the kind of guy who you don't think of how you do something? What you do is you get an idea, and it's not like, right, or you don't think, okay, we want to work like one step at a time. You kind of skip all the steps, and you're like, that's what I want to achieve, and then I have to work out how to get there. Not where you're not like a thing of, let's see where this goes. You're like, I know I need to go. I just need to make the path to get there, because that's the impression I'm getting.
Yeah, that's pretty accurate. I usually will, like, yeah, moonshots, like where
Yeah.
it's like, okay, this is where I'm going to go, and then the pieces fall together. So
Mm.
I think that if you can set your intention on exactly what it is that you want, um, and put together a solid action plan, it manifests, and
Mm.
just it's amazing.
Yeah, it sounds it. And so with let's get a little bit of detail about your book and things. I would like to speak about your ideas and link back to a bit of mindfulness, because I did see some things on your site as well about mindfulness, as well as memento mori and things like that. So I do want to get into that a little bit. I know you've got so many interesting things. I'm sure I could talk to you for hours about all these things. But so with your book, it says it's about your journey essentially. Do you want to give just sort of a brief summary of the book essentially, and why people should go get it?
Well, if people think that it's a diet book, then they shouldn't get it because it's not a diet book. It really, I would say that it's a bit of a confessional for me, because I really just bear it all. Like, I talk about, my state of mind. I talk about where I was, 3 years ago when I started writing that book, and what the basically being able to drill into the discipline that it took to make a lifestyle shift. Um, so it wasn't just, I mean, it's just not about adopting keto. It's about really making a shift in your lifestyle where you are mindful and mindful of what you're eating. One of the things that's very, uh, a big take home for me in the book, and I hope for others too, is that you shift your mindset from living to eat to eating to live. And I think once you take that step, and once you are mindful about what you're eating, you're not doing mindless munching all the time, like stuffing, chips into your mouth, or, um, snacking or drinking, sugar laden soft drinks. So it's just being mindful, but it's also like creating a path for yourself. And I think a lot of that is journaling. That's one thing that I never miss. It doesn't matter where I am. I've always got my journal with me. And the first thing I do in the morning is I start writing. I get it, I basically think it, then ink it, as I say.
Mm.
So, yeah, I get a blank page in front of me, and within 20 minutes, it's full. And I jot down, things that I want to create or manifest in my life. I write down things that I'm grateful for.
Mm.
And, then I finish it up with affirmations, like, you know, what I want to draw into my life. And I think that creating that daily roadmap for yourself, I mean, regardless if you're going to adopt a ketogenic lifestyle, but and if you're just going to try to make a shift to any type of a, improvement, that journaling is a super critical part of that.
Yeah, I agree with you. I mean, when I was a bit younger, I did write a journal for quite a while. It was about a year or so thinking about it. I did end up stopping, but I have a podcast now, so it's an audio journal almost. But it's one thing I find with it is one thing that people don't really. I try and explain to people, especially when they've got a messy head, in a sense of they struggle with mental illness or things like that, or they feel like they're thinly spread and everywhere at once. And like, I'm a super busy guy, but not as busy as you. But I do podcasting, I do loads of other things. My friends tell me that I make my own life difficult because I'm just always so busy. And one thing I say to them is like, it sounds it, because when I tell you about it, you just hear this big sort of amorphous jumble of things. And it's like, if I didn't write anything down, that it would be the same. I mean, I've got a big wall calendar up there, like a huge sort of wall calendar that's just every day of the week I write on there. It's color coded, all that sort of jazz. And I've got calendar on my phone. And what people kind of don't understand when you don't write things down, and which is where the journal thing comes in, which I can imagine being incredibly helpful, is even if you think something, saying it out loud or writing it down translates it from. I kind of think of thoughts as in like a lava lamp, and every thought is like a different color wax, and they're all there, but they're all kind of moving together. But if you write it down, it extracts that one color, and it extracts another one. And what happens is that the ones that are remaining, they're not as much of a big mess. It's kind of a bit more sort of organic and flow. And that's kind of what I think about writing and things. So you saying about the journal, it makes a lot of sense of someone who's got so many goals and so many things going on.
Yeah, that was an excellent analogy,
Thank you.
like the lava lamp thing.
You can take it
Yeah,
and
I
use
mean,
it.
yeah, I will. I yeah, I really I think that if you're not writing, I mean, journaling is one thing, but also writing your goals down. Like, I have books going back to 1994 that are all, all the goals that I wanted to do along with an action plan. But I really think that if you don't do that, it's like, I guess it would be like being in a ship, without any navigation. So, I mean, you really need to plot your course, which is essentially writing out your goals and how you're going to get there. Otherwise, if you don't have that action plan or you don't have a map, then there's no destination, and no good intention in the world is going to get you there. You're going to actually have to have a plan, and you're going to have to execute it. To me, that's the only way that you're actually going to achieve, real life-changing goals. Otherwise, you might just trip into it and be like, oh, hey, I got this done. But I really think it's 10 times more effective to, to write that stuff down. And like the calendar that you have, I have these giant sticky notes.
I've got sticky notes everywhere. Yeah, I've got
my God.
all over my desk at work. It's covered in sticky notes of just random thoughts and things. Definitely.
It looks like a crime scene, like I'm trying to solve some sort of a murder.
Like you've got insane and stuff, and you've got like string attaching all of them and that sort of thing. Yep, I'm the same.
So I have that. So my office at my house has that, and I rarely let people go in there because they're like, oh my God, what happened here? And it's like nothing.
Like, what's wrong with you? I thought I knew you. It's like, I'm not crazy. Like this is me getting the crazy out. Like
it gets the crazy out. That's
exactly. Yeah. I was thinking as well with the writing down part as well. It's very it runs very synergistically with dieting because both things it's both about self-discipline and kind of drawing your own lines in the sand. And it's saying, okay, if you're going to say, I'm going to diet and I'm going to not eat chocolate. And if you say it's a reasonable goal, like I'm not going to have chocolate Monday to Friday, and that's it. If you can stick to that, then that is one, you will get healthier, even if you eat rubbish and the other things. That's one incremental way. And if you can put in several lines in the sand, which is essentially just what a diet is, and you can have the discipline to really say, I'm going to do that, that's what a lot of it is with goals. Because if I just think, for example, let's say I'm just going to think, give up smoking. Well, if I end up not doing that, then what happens is that nothing goes wrong. That thought in my head, I was like, oh, well, I've let myself down, but in a tiny way. I only thought it anyway. You can kind of excuse yourself. But if you write it down, even if no one else sees it, you still would think, at some point that was meant to be in the stand. It was meant to mean something. And now you've letting yourself down when it's written there, you can't escape it. You can't think your way out of it. So I think that works very well with it's very interesting that you're into the sort of the dieting realm, and obviously you're an entrepreneur, and I've only just realized how synergistically the mindsets must work together for you.
It was very goal oriented. Like my goal was to be at a certain weight at a certain time, and then to map out how I was going to do that. And also, I mean, writing things down in form of like data collection, it also tells you where you've been. So that way you're able to map your progress. So yeah, I mean, checking my weight every single day, checking my blood sugar levels, blood ketone levels, tracking how much water I'm drinking, because water is a super important compound to, being successful with it. Yep. Very good.
Yeah, I'm doing it. First step.
Recycle that bottle. And,
this is new. I fill this up all the time. So yeah, I'm on that ship.
Oh, nice. Yeah, so I think that you got to have data collection. You've got to map your goals, and I think getting, starting your day off with journaling, and then, from there I go do my workout, my hour of power.
Yeah, that's a good shout. And I was going to say, with this, it's about three different things. I'm trying to work out which one to ask you first, because there's so many things there. I'd say let's talk about mindfulness a little bit, and because that kind of links in with the ideas and the writing down and things. Because when you're on the outside, a bit like when you hear people talking about, or when one hears about people speaking about dieting or being vegan or anything like that, people often get the impression it's kind of like preachy. I've been saying about mindfulness exercises to a lot of my friends, and I don't do huge meditation or anything like that. People can, and it can help really well. But for me, I just do mindfulness almost every single night before bed. I know you can do it at different times, it can help different people, but it helps me really focus is I just lay down, lay dead still, and just focus on breathing in as slowly and as kind of gently as much as I can in my nose and out from my mouth. And all I do is focus on the breathing, and then any thoughts come into my mind, I just kind of sort them and go, that's a negative thought, that's a positive thought, that's a work-related thought, and just don't think about them, just visualize the breathing. And I find for me as an individual that really, really helps. And that's kind of quite low-key mindfulness. So I was interested in sort of your techniques and when you started doing it, or your opinions on it, at least.
Yeah, well, that technique is very similar to the technique that I use. Like
Okay.
I meditate on a daily basis. It's sort of how I culminate my workout. My hour of power, if you will. I wrap it up with a meditation, and I do a minimum of 10 minutes, and that really keeps me grounded. I know that sounds sort of cliche, but it does. It keeps my feet on the ground. It helps me focus, and also helps me like move through my day with a little more sort of poise and and tranquility, I guess. So yeah, after the workout, I focus, on my breath, and I allow thoughts to pass in and pass out, but I never hang on to a thought. It's just let go.
Mm.
And yeah, I find that is really the absolute best way to start my day, because my head is super clear. I feel super relaxed, not stressed, and I'm pretty much able to handle whatever's thrown at me then.
And that's what mindfulness and meditation is kind of all about. What a lot of people hear is they hear, oh, meditation, you're going to sit cross-legged on the floor for 3 hours, say, trying to speak with the God of the universe. And it's like, no, it's like, regardless of what your religious beliefs are, that's still that's still a oversimplification and ridiculous notion of that. It's meditation is inward, it's looking inward in a sense. And it's what I find about it is mindfulness and meditation. It's about organizing your thoughts carefully and calmly and clearly, and then when you have a moment of you do get angry or you are very upset about something, it's not suddenly you're immune to these emotions. It allows you to handle them more. It's an exercise, mindfulness exercise. Your mind is it's the same as the rest of your body. If you don't take care of it, if you don't feed it in the right way, if you don't exercise it in the right way, it can atrophy, it can start to wear out in a sense. So I really think that's a great thing to do. When did you start meditating, or out of interest?
I actually started meditating when I was probably 20.
Mm.
I met this girl while I was in school, and she was older than me. She was heavily into meditation, and went to a couple classes with her, and I really started getting into it. So, I mean, it's something that I've practiced for quite some time. And, it really does keep me balanced. But I want to sort of expand a little bit on the mindfulness aspect of it. Like meditation and mindfulness are one thing, but I think that, in the book, one of the things that I was exploring is the mindfulness of eating and being mindful when you're eating. Like there's, like I mentioned before, mindless munching, and you're not really, I guess, celebrating the food. And when you talk about the philosophical sort of philosophical points of veganism and being a vegetarian, those philosophical points of no animal suffering, and a plant-based diet, is more humane. I mean, I think that's still up for debate, but I do think that people that will eat, consume animal products and not be responsible about consuming those products, like it sounds like you're a fan of Joe Rogan, and I am. And when he talks about harvesting an animal, I mean, he really takes part in that. And so, when somebody goes to a conventional grocery store, they don't know how the meat's raised, or if it's poultry, they don't know how, the chickens are treated. When you advocate or consume animal proteins that have been raised on a corporate farm, I mean, you're really complicit in that. And I think that being mindful of it and paying a little extra and actually getting your animal proteins directly from, a butcher who gets them from a farm where they're, raised on pastures. I really think that helps you eat a little less meat, and also helps you be really mindful that animal sacrificed its life for you to eat. And you just don't fill your face with it, but you actually, I guess, honor that animal, for giving of itself so you could, have sustenance. So to me, like, being super mindful about that and not wasting, not throwing food away. Like in the United States, 25% of our food goes to waste.
Oh, wow.
Because either people aren't eating it or it sits in somebody's refrigerator and goes bad. But 25% of all the food consumed in the United States goes to waste. And that is the opposite
disgusting.
of mindfulness. It is disgusting.
It's very disrespectful to the planet, to starving people, to the animals
completely.
you slaughter. It's terrible.
It is. So it's like portion control, make sure that you're not throwing food away, making sure that you honor where those, where, if you're on plant-based, you honor where those vegetables or fruits are grown. If you're eating animal proteins, that you honor, where that animal, how it was raised and how it was slaughtered. And I think that if you are able to practice that mindfulness, that's going to reflect, across the entire world.
I totally agree. I mean, I've pondered and I've toyed with the idea of veganism and vegetarianism, but in all honesty, selfishly, I don't think I can handle that sort of diet. I'm not a big fan of vegetables. I do eat vegetables every meal and I eat lots of fruit and I make sure I do, but I'm not one of those people who really likes it. Like if tomorrow you said, I'll give you a pill, which you can have every morning and you never have to eat vegetable or fruit again, yeah, I'll definitely take that. Like I just don't like the taste of any of it. I like smoothies, which are terrible for you anyway, but apart from that, which are like the highest concentration of sugar you can get out of anything even vaguely healthy, it's like great. But I do respect, as you say, and what I quite like about vegans who aren't almost morally blackmailing people, who are not forcing it down people's throats. I like it when there's people who I've had conversations with. You wouldn't know they're vegan. They don't make a big deal about it, but you talk to them and they're just like, it's my thing. It should be like religion. It's like the way you eat should be in the same sort of way. It's about being respectful of your fellow man, being respectful of the earth, regardless of whether or not you think the earth is the only place humans are. You think that there's Mother Earth and it's a big living organism. It doesn't matter, because all religion and all ideology around earth that's positive comes from respect, and it's respect of people, respect of animals, respect of plants, and as you say, and more people being vegan and vegetarian and more people being food conscious does rub off on other people. Even if you know someone who's vegan, it may just that little moment in your head where you hadn't really thought about it, but you go, me eating this bacon, this pig may have had a horrible life. Maybe I'm going to keep eating meat, but I'll have meat-free Monday, or I'll, as you say, cut down the portion control, or I'll be sure that I buy this meat from somewhere that I know that that's not being caged or anything. So I completely agree with you in that sort of in that realm.
Yeah, and I think that's our responsibility as stewards of the planet too. Like, I mean, we're here to take care of the planet, and I think that if we're wasting 25% of the food that we're harvesting, I think that that's pretty irresponsible. And I do think on a global basis, there needs to be a lot more mindfulness of what you're putting into your body and how it relates back to the whole planet.
100%, 100%. And I have interest with sort of the ketogenic diet and the paleo diet and all these sort of things that you're kind of the road you're going down, as well as mindfulness and meditation. Have you had many people much resistance about it? Many people being quite negative about it, or any of that sort of thing?
Not so much the philosophical end of things, like the journaling and being mindful, but I have gotten some pushback from people about keto. Like, oh, I'm just going to be eating bacon and cheese, and and my triglycerides are going to go up, and my LDL and my HDL and my cholesterol, and this is just it's an unhealthy way to live. So I've gotten a lot of feedback. I shouldn't say a lot, maybe a third. I get some tweets or some Instagram
Strong
direct
skepticism.
messages. Yeah, about, you know, me promoting something that's so unhealthy for people. But it's like, I mean, I have all my blood tests and I've been able to take my blood pressure from 199 over 99 down to 120 over 70, which
Oh,
is
wow.
perfect. I did that in under a year. I was able to lose 35 pounds in under a year. Um, you know, and all of my organ functions, all of my, you know, like liver, renal, all of those functions have improved on the ketogenic diet. And I don't really eat only bacon and cheese. I mean,
That'd be the dream. Guys, I've
yeah,
found the
I mean,
perfect diet. All you need is cheese and bacon. It's like,
yeah, I
count
know.
me in.
But I mean, I do like to eat salmon. Like I'll have a piece of salmon with some, you know, with some broccoli, with some steamed broccoli. I mean, there's a lot of like, it's not just, you know, filling your face with fats and proteins. It's really about balancing it, making sure that you're getting enough fiber by eating, you know, cruciferous carbohydrates, you know, cruciferous vegetables, um, you know, making sure that you're selecting the right types of fat. Like if you only eat bacon and cheese, I mean, you're going to be taking in some very dense fats into your, you know, into your blood. I don't necessarily think that that's a positive thing. I think that if you can have animal products or any products that have, you know, higher quality fat like salmon with omega-3 and nuts that have omega-6 and omega-9, they have heart protecting uh, compounds in them. So yeah, I the pushback that I get is just from people that don't understand it.
I think with all movements or revolutions, there's always the people who are skeptic and who are sort of. They, a lot of people don't like having an open mind and they don't like having their mind changed at all. Like it doesn't even matter if it's even their idea. They're just kind of they're going along with this thing and they're just like, I've been doing this for ages. I know it's right. I'm not going to look at anything else. I'm just going to put my sort of the blinkers on in a sense, you know. And
Mm-hmm.
I don't. I like to try and be as ideologically open as possible. I used to be very closed off when I was in college and things. So when I was like 16-ish, you know, I used to think everything I knew was right. You know, I was an atheist and I knew this and I knew that and da 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 da, and everyone else was wrong. It couldn't possibly be right. And then as I've gotten older, it's a bit more like spiritually, I've kind of developed a bit more and I'm less like, you're wrong and I'm right. And it's more like, my interpretation is this. Your interpretation is that. Let's discuss it. I'm interested in your
Yeah,
mindset. But with,
yeah.
obviously the difference between philosophy and sort of morality and these sort of things, they're quite subjective and many atheists would argue there is, but let's just argue for now that there's no way to prove there's no God or anything like that. But when it comes to food and diet, it's like you have science and you have like, empirical data, which, as you said previously, you're not saying keto is going to work for everyone, the entire world would be
Mm-hmm.
better if everyone's on keto. It's okay for me as an individual. This option, I'm giving this option some light. I'm showing that this is another alternative, and I think that's what life should all be about. And that's exactly what you're kind of doing. You're just saying, I'm doing this. Here's all the options. Here's all the data. Here's it. If you fancy doing that, I've got the resources and the products and whatever, excuse me, which you can use and utilize to help yourself make these decisions, find these goals. And that's the key difference between people who are positively benefiting the world with change and almost negatively. It's forcing and just allowing. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. And I think with my book, I mean, yeah, it's called Guy Gone Keto and is about my ketogenic journey and lifestyle. But really, the book is about making a lifestyle change. So it's yeah. And if keto's not your thing, the book will still help you,
Yeah.
because it will tell you the things that I used to help initiate change. Because it took a lot of discipline, you know, like I drink a bottle of wine every night and I was eating pizza, like a whole pizza every other day and
I've been there.
snacking. Yeah, I mean, it was just like, it was some really bad habits. And, they were habits. And it was something that I had to break. Like, I had to really change my relationship with food. And I really had to change my relationship with drinking. It was a reward for me at the end of the day, having a nice glass of wine, which led to two, which led to three. And then next thing you know, the bottle's gone.
Mm.
Those are a lot of useless calories and probably not very good for your liver. But the book really for me was the framework um, creating the framework for a lifestyle shift. So while it deals with keto and it's about my keto journey, it's really more about mindset shift, and really like just getting deep with your self discipline, and with some stoicism thrown in there too.
Yeah, why not? Well, it's like the good thing is with the way you've described that is it's sort of it's almost like the catalyst of the journey was deciding to go keto, but that isn't the specifics of it. That's sort of just that's like the outer shell of the journey itself in a sense, and that's kind of what it is. It's like yeah, you scratch the surface and you think it's about keto, but when you go deeper, you realize that was an excuse for a journey in a sense.
Hmm.
So it's great that you've sort of that you explain it in such a way that you're just not like, especially because you have a company which is really beneficial for people doing keto, and it's just like you're not saying,
Right.
you could easily come. You're much more an expert in it than I am, so you could easily come on here and say, look, keto, everyone needs to be on it, every single person for this reason, this reason, this reason, and I'd probably be like, okay, I will take a word for it and research it later, but you're being very open and honest about it, which is very much appreciated.
Oh,
I want to
thanks.
know your opinions on almost the politics of food, in a sense, because there's there's films like Super Size Me is probably the example everyone will know about the most. I mean, regardless that there's a lot of criticisms of that film, but if we just look at it in the base layer of, I think that was one of the first times where people were really like, oh, this food is much worse for me than I actually thought of it. You can kind of, if you don't know the information, you can kind of be ignorant about it and not have to look into it, and that's what a lot of people do. But from that film and other films and things like that, and obviously the internet being more open source for information rather than the sort of newspapers or other media outlets having control, I think that it's surprising when you sort of delve deep into it of how much of food is wrapped in sort of politics. I mean, there was the thing in I think it was the 1960s where there was like loads of Harvard scientists were paid off by sugar companies about like
Hmm.
sort of saying that fats is actually not the problem and sugar isn't. So I'm interested to think of the politics of food, essentially, what your opinions are on that.
Well, yeah, that study there was an article in the New York Times that highlighted that story about how scientists were paid by the sugar industry to vilify fat. Um, and what's interesting is I grew up during that time, and I mean, I clearly remember, um, propaganda about how fat will make you fat and you want to stay away from it, and sugar gives you energy. And I think if you flash forward now, you're going to see that, I mean, that's when you see people consuming so much sugar, that really is the cause of a lot of disease, like obesity, diabetes, also neurodegenerative disease like Alzheimer's and dementia. As those are also being referred to as diabetes type 3. So, I mean, when you look at all of the harm that sugar's done, and then also how its tentacles have really weaved into the fabric of food production, like it's so much cheaper to take sugar, which is a subsidized crop in the United States, along with corn. Like corn is also subsidized, meaning the government actually pays people to grow corn, so the price is artificially cheapened, um, which makes like corn syrup, and high fructose corn
Mm.
syrup really super cheap ingredients to include in your formulas. Meaning you could probably take out, like, let's take ketchup for example. when you look at ketchup, I mean, how much tomato paste does ketchup have in it? It's like it is the number one ingredient, but then number two ingredient is going to be high fructose corn syrup followed by sugar. So you can actually tomato paste, which costs maybe $1.90 a pound, you can reduce the amount of tomato paste that you're using and just add sugar, which you can get for 15 cents a pound, and a little bit of salt. And you're still going to get the same basic flavor. It's just going to be sweeter. But that I think is really the destructive nature of having subsidies and having, politics weaved into food, particularly with subsidies. So a company can own acres and acres of corn and then sell the corn back to themselves at a loss and still make it up by selling the high fructose corn syrup. And then at the end of the year, they get a big, huge fat check from the government. So the system is pretty broken. But the upside, right, the positive side of this is that consumers can make these decisions. Like consumers can decide, look, I'm not going to eat any sugar. I'm not going to be part of this, this destructive force. I can make better choices. And so really you could look at it as, well, it's all screwed up, or you can take a look at it and say, we can change this. And we change this by the power and the value of our decisions at the marketplace. Like, don't buy stuff that's loaded with sugar, and make those lifestyle choices. And that becomes a new political movement or a revolution.
Yeah. And it's one of those things as well, which one of the things I found, because I used to be quite overweight, especially through college and things. And when I started, I sort of wanted to diet because, you think, okay, I need to look thinner, I need to feel thinner, And then what I found is now when I don't eat, because I didn't used to eat any veg or anything like that till I was probably about 16, then I ate like little bits. But now, I'm near 25 and I live by myself. I live with friends, but I've lived away from home for almost 5 years. So it's like I am completely in control. Well, the first year I was just eating rubbish. I was having pot noodles, microwave burgers, and these sorts of things just all the time because it's like I can eat what I want, so I'm going to, and it's not good. It's terrible. And then I basically just one day I was like, I'm going to really try and be healthy. So I basically did, and I started going to the gym a lot more, and now you can really feel the difference. That's the weird thing about it. You don't want to you don't want to inadvertently fat shame or tell any friends that are overweight, be like, yeah, I feel great that I'm skinny. It's like, no, it's a weird thing where you can feel it, and it's really weird because people sort of like to distance their mind state from what they eat, and obviously what we've discussed previously or earlier rather about the gut biome and things. It makes sense. You are almost you're a moving meat vehicle. You're just a biological machine. How do you power machines? If you use a bad battery or anything like that, it's not going to run that well. It's really that simple. You put fuel in your car. If you use the wrong terrible fuel, your car's not going to run well. So it does make a lot of sense in that way of just feeling better. And I assume that links in a lot with your ketogenic diet, where you said you just feel a lot of clarity and things with that.
Yeah, and I mean, and really, we are just a meat suit. This is just a vehicle, basically a vehicle to get us around. So if you're not taking care of your vehicle, you're not going to get around. And I would say if you're using like a high sugar, high carbohydrate fuel source, your vehicle is not going to run that great. If you can give it a clean fuel source, and for me, that's going to be a high fat diet. That's for me the cleanest fuel that I can burn. So my vehicle gets around.
And that's the end of the podcast. Thanks as always for tuning in, guys. Next week will be a continuation of that chat with Thom. However, instead of it being about sort of the ketogenic diet and things, as I said in the intro, it's going to be a lot more about spirituality, death, those sort of topics. So I decided to split them into 2 standalone episodes because I think they're strong enough as themselves. In the coming weeks, I've got a Science But Simple episode I'm due to release after these 2 Thom King ones. And then I've got a few other podcasts set to record. I've got a couple of returning guests. I've got a couple of collaborations, which will be with other podcasters, a lot of them. I've got a few talks with people who are religious individuals. I've got talks with friends of mine who haven't been on the podcast yet. So I've got quite a nice wide berth of things to come over the coming months, quite a few things lined up. So it's going to be an exciting year. And as I've said, I'm going to Mexico, Amsterdam. I'm going to see Book of Mormon next week. So if you want to follow me on Instagram, Twitter, or Facebook, on Instagram, it will be the majority of things to do with my life. If I go somewhere cool, if I see a movie, I'll do movie reviews. I'll do a review of Book of Mormon and things. Not like a proper full-on big review, but I'll just give my thoughts on it, because I went and saw Wicked a couple months back. I did a little post about that with a picture or two. But yeah, that's about it really, I think, guys. So, thanks as always for tuning in. I appreciate any and all feedback, reviews on iTunes, anywhere else like that. If you like the show, share it with your friends. It's probably not going to be an episode. This probably isn't going to be a podcast where you like every single episode, but it's probably going to be a podcast where there's at least one that interests you. So if you fire it to other people, that's really appreciated. Anyway, I appreciate each and every one of you listening, especially right up to the end, and I'll talk to you all next week.